This is part 24 of Bootstrap tutorial. In this video, we'll discuss how to control the height and width of Bootstrap form controls. Here, we have the list of Bootstrap classes that help us control the height and width of form controls. To control the width of the form controls, use the Bootstrap grid classes. To control the height of the form controls, use InputLG or InputSM classes. To control the height of the form controls and associated labels on a horizontal form, use form group LG or form group SM classes. Let's look at a few examples now. Let's flip to Visual Studio. Here we have got a form with two form groups. Within the first form group, we have a label and a text box. And in the second form group, we have a label and a select element. If we view this page in the browser, this is how those form controls look like. Notice the form controls span the entire width of the container. Now what we want to do is limit the width of these form controls. We can achieve that simply by using the Bootstrap predefined grid classes. Let's see how to do that. I'm going to wrap this form group inside a row. So for that, let's create a div element with class set to row. And let's move this closing div element right here. And then on this form group, I'm going to use call access3 grid class. This is going to limit the width of these two form controls to 3 columns in the 12 column Bootstrap grid system. Let's do the same thing with the other form group that we have here. So let's wrap this inside a row. And on this form group, let's use call access3 grid class. Let's save our changes, and when we reload this page, notice the form controls are now 3 columns wide within the 12 column Bootstrap grid system as expected. The height of the form controls that we see here is the default height. To control the height of the form controls, we may use InputLG or InputSM classes. At the moment, we are not using any of these two classes, so the height that we are getting here is the default height. To set a larger height, use InputLG class. Let's look at that in action. So on the input element right here, along with the form control class, I am also going to use InputLG class. LG stands for large. And on the select element also here, I'm going to use the same class, InputLG. Let's save our changes, and when we reload this page, notice the height changes as expected. To set a smaller height, use InputSM instead of InputLG class. Let's look at that in action. So instead of InputLG, I'm going to use InputSM, and let's do the same thing here. Let's save our changes, and when we reload the page, notice the height changes as expected. Finally, let's discuss how to control the height of the form controls and their associated labels on a horizontal form. First, let's convert this vertical form to a horizontal form. To convert this to a horizontal form, the first thing that we need to do is use form horizontal class on the form element. We don't need this row, so I'm going to delete it. We don't need this call access3 class on this form group div, so I'm going to delete that as well. And then on this label element, I'm going to use control label class, and we want this label to be 1 unit wide, so let's use call access1 class. And then let's wrap this text box inside another div element with class set to call access3. So this is going to make the text box control 3 columns wide in the 12 column Bootstrap grid system. So label is 1 unit wide and this text box is 3 units wide. Let's do the same thing with the other form group that we have here. So we don't need the row. I'm going to delete that first. And we don't have to use this call access3 class right here. And on the label, we are going to use control label class, and since we want this label also to be 1 column wide, let's use call access1 class, and then let's wrap this select element inside a div element with class set to call access3. That's going to make the select element 3 columns wide. Let's save our changes, and when we reload this page, we should get a horizontal form as expected. Now the height that we see here is the default height. To set a larger height for the form controls and their associated labels, we use form group LG class. Let's use that class on the form group that we have here. So along with the form group class, we are going to use form group LG class. Let's do the same thing on this form group as well. Let's save our changes, and when we reload this page, notice now the height of the form controls and their associated labels change as expected. To set a smaller height, instead of using form group LG, use form group SM class. Let's save our changes, and when we reload the page, the height changes as expected. Thank you for listening and have a great day.